What would you do if you woke up one morning and realized you were living someone else's life? That the person sleeping in the room down the hall was a stranger wearing a wedding ring that matched yours? This is the story of Desmond White, a man who had everything money could buy, except the one thing that actually mattered. At 26 years old, Desmond White stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, staring down at a city that glittered with possibility. None of it his. Behind him, in the sprawling apartment that cost more than most people would earn in a lifetime, his wife Amber Hastings moved through rooms like a beautiful ghost. They hadn't spoken in 3 days. Not because they were fighting. They simply had nothing to say to each other. Their marriage wasn't built on love. It was built on a handshake between two powerful fathers, sealed over scotch and stock options. Amber was stunning. The kind of woman who turned heads at every charity gala, every business dinner, every society event. And Desmond played his part perfectly. The dutiful husband, the successful heir, the man who had it all figured out. In public, they were Manhattan's golden couple. In private, separate bedrooms, separate lives. A contract masquerading as a marriage. Desmond wore custom suits that cost $5,000. He shook hands with senators and CEOs. He smiled for the cameras and gave the right answers to every question. But inside, he was drowning in a life that looked perfect from the outside and felt empty on the inside. Every morning, he woke up and wondered, is this it? Is this what the rest of my life looks like? Then came the phone call that changed everything. Desmond. His father's voice crackled through the speaker. I need you and Amber at the estate tonight. Marshall Green is in town. You remember Marshall, don't you? My old college friend. He's bringing his daughter. Come for dinner. 7 o'clock sharp. Marshall Green. The name pulled Desmond back to childhood summers, fishing trips, campfire stories. A man who actually listened when Desmond spoke. Marshall had been more of a father to him than his own dad in some ways. Warm, present, real, but his daughter. Desmond had a vague memory of a quiet girl with braids, hiding behind her father's leg at some long-ago barbecue. That had to be 15 years ago. Maybe more. He agreed, of course. Desmond always agreed. That evening, he and Amber drove to the family estate in their usual silence. Amber scrolled through her phone. Desmond gripped the steering wheel and tried not to think about how many more dinners like this stretched ahead of him. How many more years of pretending. The sun was setting when they arrived, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Marshall Green stood on the patio, and the moment Desmond saw him, something in his chest loosened. Marshall's embrace was genuine, his laugh hearty and real, everything Desmond's world wasn't. Desmond, look at you, all grown up. Running the empire now, I hear. They exchanged pleasantries, fell into easy conversation, and then she walked in. Samantha Green. Time didn't stop. That's a cliché. But Desmond's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, nothing else in the world existed except her. This wasn't the shy little girl from his memory. This was a woman who moved with a confidence that seemed to pull light toward her. Her skin was a rich, deep brown that glowed in the evening sun. Her eyes sparkled with intelligence and something else, a warmth that Desmond hadn't felt in years. She wore a simple yellow dress that somehow made every other woman in the room disappear. And Desmond, who had been trained since childhood to measure every word, every gesture, every expression, Desmond opened his mouth and the truth fell out. "You're beautiful." The words hung in the air. Conversation stopped. Amber's hand tightened on his arm like a vice. Samantha's eyes went wide, surprise, and something else flickering across her face. A blush warmed her cheeks. "Thank you," she said softly. And when she smiled, Desmond felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt alive. Marshall laughed, breaking the tension, but the damage was done. Amber shot him a look that could cut glass. And Desmond, he couldn't stop staring, couldn't stop noticing the way Samantha laughed at her father's jokes, genuine musical laughter, the way she talked about her work as an art curator, her hands animated, her passion infectious. She was building programs for underprivileged youth, giving young artists a platform, making a real difference in the world. He had a purpose, joy, everything his life lacked. All through dinner, Desmond tried to focus on the business talk, the reminiscing, the small talk his mother made with Amber about some upcoming charity event. But his attention kept drifting back to Samantha. Every time their eyes met across the table, something sparked between them. Something dangerous. Something undeniable. After dinner, as the adults settled into brandy and conversation on the patio, Desmond saw his chance. Samantha had slipped away to the rose garden, alone in the moonlight, his heart pounding. He followed. "It's been a long time," he said, approaching carefully. She turned, and her smile made his pulse race. "It has. I almost didn't recognize you at first. You've grown up." They walked together through the garden, gravel crunching beneath their feet, the scent of roses heavy in the night air. And in that moment, with this woman he barely knew but somehow understood completely, Desmond did something he never did. He told the truth. "My marriage," he said quietly. "It was arranged. For business. Amber and I. We're not in love. Not even close." The confession hung between them. Samantha's eyes filled with empathy that threatened to undo him completely. "That must be hard," she whispered. "Living with someone without love." "It gets lonely," Desmond admitted. "I feel like I'm living someone else's life." Samantha reached out, her hand warm on his arm. "You deserve to find happiness, Desmond. You deserve real love." They stood there in the moonlight, inches apart, both knowing they were standing on the edge of something they couldn't take back. Desmond's heart hammered in his chest. He wanted to close the distance between them, wanted to taste her lips, wanted to know what it felt like to touch someone who saw him, really saw him, not just the heir, the husband, the role he played. Before he could move, Amber's voice cut through the night. "Desmond?" Samantha stepped back. The spell broke. Reality rushed in like cold water. "Good night, Samantha," he whispered. "Good night, Desmond," she replied, holding his gaze for one heartbeat longer than necessary. On the drive home, Amber broke the silence with ice in her voice. "You and Samantha seemed to hit it off." Desmond kept his eyes on the road. "It was nice catching up." "Just be careful," Amber warned. That night, Desmond lay awake staring at the ceiling, Samantha's laugh echoing in his mind, the memory of her hand on his arm burning like a brand. He was a married man. He had obligations, responsibilities, a reputation to uphold. But for the first time in his life, Desmond White wanted something that wasn't part of the plan. So here's the question. When your heart finally wakes up after years of sleep, when you finally meet someone who makes you feel alive, do you reach for it, even if it means burning down everything you've built? Or do you stay in your golden cage and wonder for the rest of your life what might have been? 7 days. That's how long Desmond lasted before he found an excuse to see her again. 7 days of lying awake at night, replaying their conversation in the rose garden. 7 days of going through the motions at board meetings, while his mind wandered to the way Samantha's eyes had softened when she told him he deserved real love. 7 days of sitting across from Amber at breakfast, the silence between them now loaded with an unspoken truth. He had found something she could never give him. On the 8th day, fate handed him exactly what he needed. His father dropped a manila envelope on Desmond's desk with a casual thud. "Marshall left these documents behind at our meeting yesterday. Tax forms, investment papers, important stuff. Would you mind running them over to his place? He's staying at that rental property on the north side." Desmond's pulse quickened, but he kept his face neutral. "Of course. I'll take care of it." His father nodded and walked out, completely oblivious to the fact that he'd just given his son permission to walk straight into temptation. The drive across town felt like both an eternity and a heartbeat. Desmond's hands were slick on the steering wheel. What was he doing? He was a married man delivering documents to a family friend. That's all this was. Professional courtesy. Nothing more. But his heart was racing like he was 16 again, driving to pick up his first date. The Green Rental was a beautiful colonial-style home in one of Manhattan's quieter, tree-lined neighborhoods, the kind of place where old money whispered instead of shouted. Desmond parked, grabbed the envelope, and walked up the stone pathway with his heart in his throat. He could hear splashing from the backyard. Laughter? Her laughter. He rang the doorbell and waited, smoothing down his tie, trying to steady his breathing. The door opened, and every rational thought in Desmond's head evaporated. Samantha stood there in a burgundy bikini, water droplets glistening on her deep brown skin like diamonds. A sheer white cover-up was loosely tied at her waist, doing absolutely nothing to hide her curves. Her hair was pulled up, a few wet curls clinging to her neck. She looked like a goddess, and Desmond forgot how to breathe. Desmond, her face lit up with genuine delight. "This is a surprise." He somehow found his voice. Documents. For your father. My dad asked me to drop them off." "Dad's out at a meeting, but he should be back soon. Come in, please." She stepped aside, and Desmond caught the scent of chlorine and something floral. Her perfume or her shampoo, he couldn't tell. Either way, it made his head spin. He followed her through the cool interior of the house, desperately trying not to stare at the way the water had made her skin glisten, the way her hips moved as she walked ahead of him. This was dangerous. This was so incredibly dangerous. The back patio opened onto a sparkling pool surrounded by manicured hedges, private, secluded, worlds away from anyone who might recognize them. Samantha grabbed a towel and patted down her arms. The movement, somehow both innocent and unbearably sensual. "I was trying to beat the heat," she explained with an easy smile. "Can I get you something to drink? Water? Lemonade?" "Water would be great," Desmond managed, loosening his collar. He was burning up, and it had nothing to do with the temperature. She disappeared inside and returned moments later with 2 glasses of ice water, condensation already beading on the glass. She sat on the lounge chair beside him, wrapping the towel around her shoulders, and suddenly they were alone together. Really alone. No parents on a nearby patio. No wife gripping his arm. Just the 2 of them, and the weight of everything unspoken hanging in the summer air. They started with safe topics. His work, the latest merger his father was pushing through. The stress of managing people twice his age who resented taking orders from someone they'd known since he was in diapers. Her gallery, an upcoming exhibition featuring emerging black artists, a mentorship program she was developing for kids from underserved communities. She spoke with such passion, her hands moving expressively, her eyes bright with purpose. But beneath the surface of their polite conversation, something else was happening. The way her gaze lingered on him a beat too long. The way he couldn't stop noticing the curve of her shoulder, the graceful line of her neck. The air between them was electric, charged with a tension that made Desmond's skin prickle. Samantha tilted her head, studying him with those knowing eyes. "You seem tense, Desmond. Am I making you nervous?" The question hung there, playful but loaded. Desmond could have laughed it off, could have deflected. Instead, he met her gaze and told the truth. "Maybe a little," he admitted, his voice dropping lower. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night at the estate." The words were out before he could call them back. Samantha's playful expression softened into something more vulnerable, more real. Her breath caught, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about you, too." 4 words. That's all it took. 4 words. And the careful distance they'd been maintaining crumbled like sand. Desmond reached out, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and took her hand. Her fingers curled around his, warm and delicate and perfect. They both leaned closer without even realizing it, drawn together by a force neither of them could name, but both of them felt in every nerve ending. The world narrowed to just the 2 of them. The sound of birds faded. The traffic noise from the distant street disappeared. There was only Samantha's face, inches from his, her eyes searching his with a mixture of desire and uncertainty that matched exactly what he was feeling. Desmond lifted his free hand and gently brushed a damp curl away from her face, his fingertips grazing her cheek. Her skin was impossibly soft. She closed her eyes at his touch, a tiny sigh escaping her lips. "This is probably crazy," he whispered. "Completely crazy," she agreed. But she didn't pull back. If anything, she leaned closer. Desmond closed the distance and kissed her. Her lips were soft and sweet, and the moment they touched, something inside him that had been locked away for years broke free. Samantha responded instantly, kissing him back with a hunger that matched his own. Her hand slipped up to the back of his neck, fingers twining into his hair, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened. What started tentative became passionate, desperate. Desmond cupped her face with both hands, tilting her head, tasting her like a man dying of thirst who'd finally found water. Samantha made a soft sound in the back of her throat that sent electricity racing down his spine. Her other hand pressed against his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palm. Time lost all meaning. It could have been seconds or hours. Desmond had no idea. All he knew was the warmth of her mouth, the way she fit perfectly against him, the intoxicating feeling of being completely, utterly alive for the first time in years. This wasn't like kissing Amber on their wedding day, a cold, performative press of lips for the cameras. This was real. This was everything. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samantha's eyes were wide and dark with desire. Her lips were swollen from his kisses. She looked beautiful and shocked and happy all at once. "Desmond," she whispered. But whatever she was going to say was cut off by the sharp trill of his phone vibrating on the glass patio table. Reality crashed back in like a bucket of ice water. Desmond glanced at the screen. Amber, of course it was Amber, his wife, the woman he just betrayed, even if their marriage was a loveless contract. The guilt hit him like a physical blow. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling back, his voice rough. Samantha stepped away too, wrapping her arms around herself, the dreamy expression on her face giving way to worry. In the distance, they heard a car door slam. Marshall, returning home. Their stolen moment was over. "I should go," Desmond said, even though every fiber of his being screamed at him to stay. Samantha nodded, trying to smile, but not quite managing it. "I understand." He grabbed the envelope he'd come to deliver, the excuse that had given him this stolen moment, and they walked to the front door together. At the threshold, he paused. He couldn't leave it like this. Couldn't let her think this was just a mistake, a moment of weakness he'd regret. Desmond squeezed her hand, their fingers lingering. "This isn't goodbye," he said firmly. Samantha's lips curved into a small, genuine smile, hope flickering in her eyes. "You know where to find me." As Desmond drove away, he looked in the rearview mirror and saw her standing in the doorway, watching him leave, her silhouette framed by the afternoon light. His heart ached at the sight. But here's what scared him most. It wasn't just desire he felt. It was something deeper, something real, something that made him want to turn the car around and damn the consequences. What do you do when one kiss shows you what you've been missing your entire life? When you finally taste real passion, real connection, do you go back to your empty marriage and pretend it never happened? Or do you reach for more, knowing that every stolen moment takes you further from the life you're supposed to be living? Desmond reached for more. It started with a phone call that night. He waited until Amber was asleep, or at least locked away in her own bedroom, before retreating to his study. His hands were shaking as he dialed Samantha's number. She answered on the second ring, breathless, like she'd been waiting. "Hello? It's me," he said, and just hearing her soft intake of breath on the other end made his chest tight. "I was hoping you'd call." They talked for 3 hours that night, about everything and nothing. Samantha told him about growing up as a black girl in predominantly white spaces, the microaggressions at her prep school, the assumptions people made, the way her parents taught her to hold her head high and never apologize for taking up space. She told him about family reunions filled with music and laughter and food that tasted like home, about her grandmother's collard greens and her uncle's terrible jokes and the way her mother could silence a room with just a look. Desmond opened up about his own childhood, the loneliness of being groomed for greatness, the way vulnerability was treated like weakness in his family, the endless parade of expectations he could never quite meet, how he'd learned to perform successful son the way an actor performs a role, so much so that sometimes he forgot where the performance ended and the real Desmond began. "Until now," he admitted, quietly, "with you, I don't have to perform. I can just be." "I like who you are," Samantha whispered back. The real you. When they finally hung up at 2 a.m, Desmond felt more connected to her than he'd ever felt to anyone in his life. That's how it started. Late-night phone calls became a nightly ritual. Hushed conversations after midnight, sharing secrets and dreams and fears. They learned each other in whispers, building a intimacy that went far deeper than physical attraction. But the physical attraction was impossible to ignore. Within a week, they found ways to see each other. Desmond would slip away from his office during lunch, driving across town to a quiet cafe where no one from his social circle would ever think to look. Samantha would be waiting in a corner booth, and the moment he slid in across from her, his world shifted into focus. They'd hold hands under the table like teenagers, fingers intertwined, talking softly while their untouched coffee went cold. Some evenings, when Amber was out at one of her charity events or gallery openings, the social obligations she seemed to actually enjoy, Desmond would park a street away from the greenhouse. Samantha would slip out her back door, and they'd meet in a nearby park, walking under oak trees as dusk fell, stealing kisses in the shadows, talking about a future that seemed impossible but felt more real than anything else in their lives. Every goodbye got harder. Every time Desmond had to let go of her hand and return to his real life, something inside him tore a little more. "I hate this," Samantha whispered one evening as they stood by his car, their foreheads pressed together. "I hate hiding. I hate that I can't just call you whenever I want. I hate that you have to go back to her." "I hate it too," Desmond said, cupping her face, memorizing every detail of her features in the fading light. "But I'm not giving you up. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to find a way for us to be together. Really together." She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of hope that made his chest ache. 3 weeks after that first kiss by the pool, Desmond took the biggest risk yet. "I have a business conference in Connecticut," he told Amber over breakfast, not quite meeting her eyes. 2 days. Some potential investors want to discuss the expansion into overseas markets." Amber barely looked up from her phone. "Fine. Have your assistant send me the hotel information in case I need to reach you." He almost laughed at how easy the lie was. How little she cared where he went or what he did, as long as he maintained their public image. Their marriage was so hollow that she didn't even question him anymore. The hotel Desmond booked wasn't in Connecticut. It was a small seaside inn 3 hours north, in a quiet coastal town where nobody knew the name White or Hastings or Green, where they could be anonymous, where they could be free. Samantha met him there Friday evening, her overnight bag slung over her shoulder, and nervousness written all over her beautiful face. "I've never done anything like this," she admitted, as they stood in the parking lot, suddenly uncertain. Desmond took her hand. "Neither have I. We can leave right now if you want. No pressure, no expectations." But Samantha shook her head, squeezing his fingers. "I don't want to leave. I want to be with you." The inn was everything Instagram-perfect New England coastal charm. White clapboard siding, blue shutters, window boxes overflowing with flowers. Their room was small but cozy, with a 4-poster bed covered in a white duvet and windows that overlooked the ocean. Desmond could hear the waves, even through the glass. For a moment, they just stood there, the weight of what they were about to do settling over them. This wasn't stolen kisses in a park or held hands under a cafe table. This was real. This was crossing a line they couldn't cross. Samantha broke the tension by laughing softly. "I'm nervous," she admitted. "Isn't that silly? I feel like I'm 16. "I'm nervous too," Desmond confessed. He was, not because he didn't want this. God, he wanted her so badly it hurt, but because he knew this weekend would change everything. There would be no going back after this. They started slow. They walked on the beach as the sun set, shoes in hand, feet in the cold surf, fingers intertwined. They talked about everything, her dreams of opening her own gallery someday, his secret desire to write instead of running a corporation, the lives they might have lived if they'd met under different circumstances. "What would you have done?" Samantha asked, turning to face him as the waves crashed around their ankles. "If you hadn't been born into all this money and expectation?" Desmond thought about it, really thought about it. "I think I would have been a teacher," he said, finally. "High school English. I'd have made terrible money and lived in a small apartment, and I would have been happy." Samantha's eyes shone. "I can see that. You'd be one of those teachers kids remember forever, the one who actually listened." "And you?" he asked. "If you could do anything?" "I'm already doing it," she said simply, "helping young artists find their voice. That's all I've ever wanted." They found a tiny bistro for dinner, tucked away on a side street, with only 6 tables and a menu written in chalk. They sat close together, thighs touching under the table, sharing plates and stealing bites from each other's forks. When Samantha laughed at one of his stories, her head thrown back with pure joy, Desmond felt something shift in his chest. This was what life was supposed to feel like. This is easy. This happiness. This bone-deep certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Back at the inn, as the moon rose over the ocean and silvered the waves, they finally gave in to what they'd both been wanting since that first kiss. Desmond closed the door behind them, and suddenly the air in the room felt charged, electric. Samantha turned to face him, her eyes dark with desire and something deeper. Trust, vulnerability, love. He crossed to her slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind. But she didn't step back. Instead, she reached up and cupped his face, pulling him down for a kiss that started gentle, but quickly turned desperate. They undressed each other with trembling hands. Buttons fumbled, zippers stuck, nervous laughter breaking through the tension. And then there were no more barriers between them. Just skin against skin, heartbeat against heartbeat. Desmond had been with Amber, of course. Perfunctory encounters in the early days of their marriage, before even that pretense had faded. But this was nothing like that. This was two people truly seeing each other, truly wanting each other, coming together not out of obligation but out of genuine desire and connection. When he finally moved inside her, Samantha gasped his name, her fingers digging into his shoulders. They moved together slowly at first, then with increasing urgency, both of them chasing something they'd been denied for too long. Not just physical pleasure, though God, that was there, intense and overwhelming, but emotional connection. The feeling of being completely known and completely wanted. When they finally shattered together, Samantha crying out and Desmond burying his face in her neck, it felt like more than just a climax. It felt like homecoming. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the white sheets, hearts still racing, skin still flushed. Samantha traced patterns on Desmond's chest, and he ran his fingers through her hair, neither of them willing to break the spell by speaking. But finally, as the first light of dawn started to creep through the windows, Desmond whispered what he'd been holding back. "I've never been this happy." Samantha looked up at him, and he saw tears in her eyes. Not sad tears, but the kind that come from feeling too much all at once. She reached up and brushed away a tear that had escaped down his own cheek, a tear he hadn't even realized was there. "I never knew love could feel this real," she whispered back. Love, she'd said it. The word hung between them, terrifying and perfect and true. "I love you," Desmond said, because suddenly he needed her to hear it, needed her to know. "I love you, Samantha. I'm in love with you." Her smile was radiant, even through the tears. "I love you too. So much it scares me." They made love again as the sun rose, slower this time, savoring every touch, every kiss, every moment, because they both knew that soon they'd have to leave this perfect bubble and return to the real world, to complications and consequences, and a wife who would destroy them both if she found out. But for now, wrapped in each other's arms as morning light painted the room gold, they pretended this was their real life, that every morning could be like this, that love was enough. Back in Manhattan, reality crashed down hard. Desmond returned to his penthouse Sunday evening, still drunk on the memory of Samantha's touch, her laugh, the way she'd fallen asleep with her head on his chest. He was floating, barely aware of his surroundings, until he walked through the door and found Amber waiting. "How was Connecticut?" she asked, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp. "Fine. Productive?" The lie came easily now. Too easily. "Strange," Amber mused, swirling her wineglass. "I called the hotel you gave me. They said they had no conference booked there this weekend. No record of you checking in at all." Desmond's blood turned to ice. She knew, or at least she suspected. But Amber just smiled, cold and knowing. "I don't care what you do, Desmond. I really don't. Just don't embarrass me. Whatever this is, keep it quiet. We have an understanding. Remember?" She stood, setting down her glass, and walked past him toward her bedroom. At the doorway, she paused. "Oh, and Desmond, if you do plan to blow up our arrangement, you should know that my father's company holds 40% of your father's commercial real estate portfolio. Think about what a divorce would do to that." She smiled sweetly. "Have a good night." The threat was clear. Stay in line, or watch everything burn. But even as fear twisted in Desmond's gut, even as he realized the danger he was in, all he could think about was Samantha, the way she'd looked at him with such trust and love, the promises they'd whispered in the dark. How could he give that up? How could he go back to his empty life, now that he knew what real happiness felt like? Meanwhile, across town, Samantha sat with her father on their front porch, wrestling with her own guilt. Marshall Green was a perceptive man. He'd watched his daughter these past weeks, seen her dreamy smiles, her constant phone checking, the way she lit up and then tried to hide it. He'd been young once. He knew the signs. "Samantha," he said gently, "is there something you want to talk about?" She broke. Everything came pouring out. How she'd reconnected with Desmond, how they'd fallen in love, how wrong it was but how right it felt, how she was terrified and elated and guilty all at once. She cried as she confessed, afraid her father would be disappointed, would tell her she was making a terrible mistake. Marshall listened to everything. When she finished, he pulled her into a hug. "Baby girl," he said softly, "I won't pretend this is easy. I know Desmond's married. I know people will judge you. I know the complications ahead." He pulled back to look at her. "But I also see the way you light up when you talk about him. I've known that boy since he was 8 years old, and I've never seen him look the way he looks at you." "You're not angry?" Samantha asked, searching his face. "I'm worried," Marshall admitted. "The path you're on isn't an easy one, but I raised you to be strong, to stand tall, to follow your heart with integrity." He squeezed her hands. "If you and Desmond truly love each other, if this is real, then fight for it. Just promise me you'll hold your head high, no matter what people say." His blessing, cautious as it was, gave Samantha the strength she needed. This love was worth fighting for. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. For the next month, Desmond and Samantha lived in 2 worlds. In one, they were secret lovers stealing every moment they could. Lunch breaks that turned into hours, evening walks in the park, hushed phone calls after midnight. In the other, Desmond was the dutiful husband at society events, Amber on his arm, both of them smiling for cameras while dying inside. The strain was starting to show. At a board meeting, Desmond's father had to call his name 3 times before he responded, so lost was he in thoughts of Samantha. His assistant noticed he was taking longer and longer lunch breaks. He'd returned to the office with his tie slightly askew, his collar wrinkled, and a dreamy expression that had no place in a corporate setting. And Amber noticed everything. She watched her husband check his phone constantly, saw the way he'd smile at messages before quickly hiding the screen. She noticed when he started coming home later, offering increasingly creative excuses. She saw the way he'd started pushing back on public appearances, as if he could no longer stomach playing the happy couple. The lies were piling up, and the foundation was starting to crack. One evening, as they were getting ready for yet another charity gala, this one for children's literacy, Amber's pet cause, Desmond's phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. He was in the shower, and Amber, driven by suspicion she could no longer ignore, picked it up. The message preview was innocuous enough. Miss you. Can't wait to see you. But it was enough. More than enough. Amber's hands shook as she set the phone down. She'd suspected, of course. The signs had been there for weeks, but seeing it in black and white made it real, made it marginal. Rather than confront Desmond in that moment, rather than give in to the rage and hurt and wounded pride burning in her chest, Amber made a calculated decision. If she was going to end this, she needed proof. Real, undeniable evidence that would give her leverage, that would protect her interests when everything fell apart. The next morning, while Desmond was at work, Amber called a private investigator her father had used for business matters. "I need you to follow my husband," she said coldly. "I need photos, dates, times, everything, and I need it quickly." The investigator was good at his job. Too good. Within a week, Amber had a manila envelope filled with evidence. Photos of Desmond and Samantha holding hands at that quiet cafe. Pictures of them embracing by her car in the evening light. A shot of them kissing on a park bench, completely lost in each other, oblivious to the world around them. The most damning photo showed them at the doorway of the seaside inn. Desmond's hand on Samantha's face, looking at her like she was his entire world. Amber spread the photos across her desk and stared at them. She felt something twist in her chest. Not heartbreak exactly, because she'd never loved Desmond, but wounded pride. Anger at being made a fool, and underneath it all, a strange, unexpected sadness for the life they'd never had. But sentiment wouldn't serve her now. She needed strategy. Amber gathered the photos, slipped them into a new envelope, and waited for the right moment to strike. That moment came 3 days later. Desmond had spent the evening at Samantha's house. Marshall was out of town for business, giving them rare privacy. They'd cooked dinner together, laughing, as Samantha tried to teach him how to properly season collard greens. They'd danced in her kitchen to old Motown records, swaying to the temptations while the world outside ceased to exist. They'd made love on her couch, tender and passionate and perfect. For a few hours, Desmond let himself imagine that this was his real life, that he came home to Samantha every night, that he didn't have to say goodbye, didn't have to put on his mask and return to a woman who felt like a stranger. "Come away with me," he whispered into Samantha's hair as they lay tangled together afterward. "I'll file for divorce. We'll go somewhere new. Start over." "Is it really that simple?" Samantha asked, wanting to believe, but knowing better. "No," Desmond admitted. "It'll be messy and complicated and probably destroy some relationships. But I don't care anymore. I can't keep living this lie." Samantha looked up at him, her eyes shining. "Then let's do it. Let's really do it. I'm ready if you are. They kissed then, sealing the promise. Desmond felt lighter than he had in months, years maybe. Tomorrow he'd talk to a lawyer. Tomorrow he'd start the process of untangling himself from Amber. Tomorrow he'd begin building the life he actually wanted. But first he had to go home one more time. The penthouse was dark when Desmond arrived, around 11. He assumed Amber was already asleep. She usually was by this hour. He was planning to pack some things, maybe sleep on the couch in his study, start creating the separation they'd need for what came next. But when he walked into the living room, he found Amber sitting in the dark, a single lamp illuminating her face. A glass of red wine sat on the table beside her, and spread across the coffee table, catching the light, were photographs. Desmond's heart stopped. He didn't need to move closer to know what they were. He could see himself in those pictures, see Samantha, see the truth of what they'd been trying to hide laid bare. "How could you?" Amber said, her voice low and vibrating with fury. Wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Desmond stood frozen in the doorway, his mind racing. Every excuse, every explanation died on his lips. There was no point in lying now. "Amber, I don't." She held up a hand, cutting him off. She stood, moving to the table, picking up one of the photos. It showed Desmond kissing Samantha by her front door, his hand cradling her face, both of them completely absorbed in each other. "I gave you freedom, Desmond. We had an understanding. You could have your little diversions, your discreet affairs, as long as you were careful, as long as you didn't embarrass me." She threw the photo down with enough force to make it skitter across the glass. "But this?" Her voice cracked slightly, the fury mixing with something that might have been hurt. "This isn't discreet. This isn't careful. You've made a fool of me. People are starting to notice. Starting to talk." Desmond found his voice. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it. Not sorry for loving Samantha, never that, but sorry for the pain he'd caused. "I never wanted to humiliate you." "Then what did you want?" Amber demanded. "What was your plan here? To just keep sneaking around until someone caught you? Until the tabloids got hold of this?" Before Desmond could answer, before he could tell her that he was planning to file for divorce, to end their farce of a marriage, the front door opened. Desmond's father walked in, using the key he'd always maintained to the penthouse. He stopped short, taking in the scene. His son and daughter-in-law facing off, the tension thick enough to cut, photographs scattered across the table. "What the hell is going on here?" His voice boomed through the space. Amber's composure cracked. "Ask your son," she said bitterly. "Ask him about his affair." Desmond's father's face went pale. He moved closer, picking up one of the photographs. His jaw clenched as he recognized the woman in the pictures. Marshall's daughter. His voice was barely controlled. "You're having an affair with Marshall Green's daughter?" The disappointment in his father's voice cut deeper than any anger could have. Desmond felt like he was 16 again, being called into the study to explain some teenage transgression. But he wasn't 16, he was 26. and he'd fallen in love with a woman who made him feel truly alive for the first time in his life. "Yes," Desmond said, lifting his chin. "No more hiding. No more shame. Her name is Samantha, and I love her." The silence that followed was deafening. So here's the question that's been building since that first kiss by the pool, since that first stolen moment in the rose garden. How far are you willing to go for real love? When keeping your affair secret means living a lie, but exposing it means destroying everything you've built, your reputation, your family relationships, your business empire, what do you choose? When the woman you love is waiting for you to be brave enough to claim her publicly, but doing so could cost you everything, do you find the courage? Do you let fear win? Because in the next room, Desmond's father was reaching for his phone, about to call Marshall and destroy a friendship decades in the making. Amber was calculating her next move, planning how to leverage this scandal for maximum advantage. And across town, Samantha was lying awake, wondering if the man she loved would really fight for her when the moment of truth came. The foundation was cracking. The lies were exposed. And Desmond White was about to learn exactly what love would cost him. Desmond's father dropped the photograph like it had burned him. His face cycled through emotions: shock, anger, disappointment, and something that looked almost like grief. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice was quiet now, which was somehow worse than yelling. "Marshall Green has been my closest friend for 30 years. We built businesses together. We raised money for senators together. We trusted each other with our family's futures." "I know," Desmond started. "You don't know anything." His father's control snapped. "You've been sneaking around with his daughter while married to Amber, while our families are financially entangled in dozens of ways, while your wife's father holds the keys to half our commercial portfolio." Amber stood with her arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with grim satisfaction. She'd wanted her father, in law, to know, wanted the full weight of family and business pressure to come crashing down on Desmond. "This isn't just about you," his father continued, pacing now. "Your mother's foundation is funded by Amber's mother's connections. Your sister's hospital wing was donated by the Hastings family. Our expansion into European markets depends on relationships Amber's father cultivated." He stopped, turning to face his son directly. "And you're willing to throw all of that away for what? Some fling with your godfather's daughter?" That word, fling, ignited something in Desmond's chest. "It's not a fling," he said, his voice rising. "I love her. Truly, deeply love her. What Samantha and I have is real, and I'm not apologizing for it." Amber let out a bitter laugh. "Real? You barely know her. You've been sneaking around for what? A few weeks? A month? And you're ready to destroy 2 families over that." "I know her better than I've ever known anyone," Desmond shot back, turning to Amber. "In the time I've spent with Samantha, I've felt more alive, more myself, than in the entire 3 years of our marriage. You and I both know this," he gestured between them, "was never real. We were never in love. We never even pretended to be, except for the cameras." "That doesn't give you the right," Amber started. "You're absolutely right," Desmond interrupted, his voice calmer now. "It doesn't give me the right to sneak around and lie. You deserved better than that. You deserved honesty. So hear it. I'm in love with someone else. I have been for months, and I can't do this anymore. Can't keep pretending. Can't keep living this life we've created." The room fell silent. Desmond's father sank into a chair, suddenly looking years older. Amber's facade cracked, her eyes glistening with tears that might have been rage or hurt or both. "You have obligations," his father said wearily. "Responsibilities. The family business, the shareholders, our reputation. I've fulfilled those obligations my entire life," Desmond said, his voice breaking. "I married who you told me to marry. I took the job you wanted me to take. I showed up at every event, shook every hand, smiled for every camera. I built my whole life around what everyone else wanted for me." He looked at his father, with tears burning in his eyes. "When does it end, Dad? When do I get to want something for myself? When do I get to choose my own happiness?" His father had no answer. In the heavy silence, Desmond heard the echo of his own question. When did duty end and living begin? The front door opened again. Amber had texted her father during the confrontation. Richard Hastings stormed in, his face red with anger, his expensive suit somehow making him look more menacing. "Is it true?" he demanded, advancing on Desmond. "Is it true you've been having an affair? Making a fool of my daughter?" "Mr. Hastings," Desmond started. "Don't." Richard's voice was ice. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I want you to know exactly what happens if you pursue this divorce Amber says you're planning." He pulled out his phone, pulling up documents. "Every partnership between our families ends. Every joint venture dissolves. I'll call in every favor. Tank every deal your father has that involves my connections. When I'm done, the white name won't be worth the paper it's printed on in this city." Desmond's father stood. "Richard, let's not be hasty. We can find a solution." "There is no solution," Richard spat. "Your son made his choice when he decided my daughter wasn't good enough for him. When he decided to throw away everything our family's built for some—" "Don't," Desmond said, his voice dangerous. "Don't you dare say anything disrespectful about Samantha. This isn't her fault. This is about me and Amber, and a marriage that never should have happened." He turned to Amber, who was standing rigid, her face a mask. "Amber, you're right. You didn't deserve this mess. Neither of us wanted this marriage. You've said so yourself. We've been living separate lives under the same roof, maintaining a facade for everyone else's benefit." His voice softened. "Maybe it's time we both admitted the truth and let each other go." For a moment, something flickered across Amber's face. Was it relief? But it was quickly replaced by cold fury. "Let each other go?" She laughed harshly. "You think it's that simple? You've humiliated me, Desmond. Made me look like a fool who couldn't keep her husband interested. Do you know what people will say? That I wasn't good enough. That I failed." Her voice cracked on that last word, and Desmond realized that beneath her anger was genuine pain. Not heartbreak. They'd never loved each other enough for that. But the deep wound of public humiliation, of being rejected in a way everyone would see. "I'm sorry," he said again, meaning it. "I'm sorry I hurt you. But staying in this marriage won't fix that. We'll both just be more miserable." Amber stared at him for a long moment. Then, with shaking hands, she pulled off her wedding ring and set it on the table with a sharp clink. "We're done," she said quietly. "I want you out of this apartment. My lawyers will contact yours in the morning." She looked at her father. "Let's go." Richard started to protest, to threaten more consequences, but Amber cut him off. "Dad, it's over. Let's just go." As the Hastings family prepared to leave, Amber paused at the door. "I hope she's worth it," she said to Desmond, her voice empty. "I hope this grand love affair of yours survives what's coming." Then they were gone, the door clicking shut with finality. Desmond and his father stood in the wreckage of the evening, surrounded by scattered photographs and shattered expectations. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, his father spoke. "Are you sure about this, Desmond? Really sure? Because there's no going back after tonight. The Hastings will make good on their threats. Marshall will find out, probably already knows. If I understand how close he is to his daughter, your reputation will take a hit. There will be scandal." Desmond didn't hesitate. "I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I love her, Dad. Samantha makes me want to be a better man. She sees me, really sees me, in a way no one else ever has. And I can't let her go." His father studied him for a long moment. Desmond saw something shift in his eyes, maybe recognition of the kind of love his father had once felt for Desmond's mother, before business and ambition had worn it down to comfortable partnership. "Then go," his father said gruffly, waving toward the door. "Go to her. Tell her what happened. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." It was more support than Desmond had expected, more than he'd hoped for. He crossed to his father and embraced him. A quick, tight hug that said everything they couldn't put into words. Then Desmond grabbed his keys and ran. He had to get to Samantha, had to tell her that he'd chosen her, publicly and irrevocably, that there was no more hiding, no more secrets, that he was finally, truly free to love her the way she deserved. The elevator ride down felt like an eternity. The drive across town took forever, and as Desmond raced through the dark streets, only one thought filled his mind. What would Samantha say when she learned that loving him had cost him everything? Would she still want him when the fairy tale turned messy and real? When the scandal broke and their names were dragged through the tabloids, would the love they'd built in stolen moments be strong enough to survive the harsh light of day? He was about to find out. Would she still be waiting for him? That's all Desmond could think, as he pushed his car through the empty Manhattan streets, the engine roaring in the quiet of midnight. Would Samantha still want him now that loving him meant becoming the center of a scandal? Now that their secret was exposed and the fallout had begun? His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every empty block between him and her house stretched like miles. Back at the Green residence, Samantha sat on the front porch with her father, her knee bouncing anxiously, her hands twisted together in her lap. Marshall had gotten the call 20 minutes ago. From Desmond's father, his voice tight with stress and disappointment, explaining that the affair had been discovered, that everything was falling apart, that his son was in love with Marshall's daughter, and the whole thing was about to become a very public mess. What if he changes his mind? Samantha whispered, staring out at the dark street. What if he realizes, I'm not worth all this trouble? Marshall put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. Baby girl, if that boy loves you the way I think he does, the way I've seen him look at you, he'll be here. Real love doesn't run when things get hard. It shows up. But his family, his business, everything except what matters most, Marshall said gently. I've known Desmond since he was 8 years old. I've watched him live his entire life trying to please everyone else. If he's finally chosen something for himself, chosen you, he's not going to walk away now. Samantha wanted to believe him. Good. She wanted to believe him, but the minutes ticked by, and doubt crept in like fog. What if Desmond's father had talked him out of it? What if the weight of his obligations had crushed his courage? What if their love, as real as it felt, wasn't enough to overcome everything standing against them? Then she heard it. The roar of an engine, the squeal of tires, as a car took the corner too fast. Samantha stood, her heart leaping into her throat. Marshall stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, steadying her. Desmond's car skidded to a stop in front of the house. The door flew open before the engine even died, and he was running, sprinting up the walkway with his tie loose, his hair wild, his eyes searching frantically until they found her. Samantha, he breathed, and just hearing her name in his voice made her knees weak. She ran down the porch steps and threw herself into his arms. He caught her, lifting her off the ground, burying his face in her hair. For a moment, they just held each other, trembling, breathless, overwhelmed. It's done, Desmond said, his voice muffled against her neck. I told them everything. Amber knows. My father knows. It's all out in the open now. Samantha pulled back, just enough to see his face. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, but blazing with determination. What happened? She asked, searching his expression. Are you okay? Amber's filing for divorce, he said, the words tumbling out. Her father threatened to destroy my family's business. My dad tried to convince me to fix things, to smooth it over somehow, but I told them all the same thing. I love you. I'm in love with you. And I'm done hiding it. Tears spilled down Samantha's cheeks. You really did it? You really chose? You? Desmond finished, cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. I chose you. I'll always choose you. I'm done living any life where you're not by my side. She laughed through her tears, a sound of pure relief and joy. Behind them, Marshall discreetly stepped back toward the house, giving them privacy, but not before catching Desmond's eye. The older man nodded. Not quite approval, not yet, but acknowledgement. Respect for the courage it took to do what Desmond had just done. Samantha's hands framed Desmond's face, her fingers trembling. Do you know what you're risking? The scandal, the gossip, the damage to your reputation. I know exactly what I'm risking, Desmond said firmly, and I know exactly what I'm gaining. You, Sam. A real life. Real happiness. That's worth everything else. Then right there on her front lawn under the glow of the porch light, with her father watching from the window and the weight of the world lifted from his shoulders, Desmond White dropped to one knee. Samantha gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. I don't have a ring yet, Desmond said, his voice shaking with emotion. I didn't plan this, but I can't wait another second to ask you. He took her hand, his eyes locked on hers. Samantha Green, you are the light that shattered my darkness. You brought my heart back to life when I didn't even know it was dead. You showed me what it means to really live, to really love. I don't want to spend another day without you. Will you marry me? Once I'm free, once the divorce is final, will you be my wife? Samantha was crying openly now, nodding before she could even find words. Yes, she managed, her voice breaking. Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes. Desmond surged to his feet, and she threw her arms around his neck, kissing him with everything she had. All the love, all the fear, all the hope that had been building since that first moment in the rose garden. He kissed her back just as fiercely, both of them laughing and crying at the same time because it was too much. All of it, the relief and joy and overwhelming rightness of finally being free to love each other openly. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Desmond pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, he whispered. I love you too, she whispered back. So much. From the porch, Marshall called out, You two want to come inside. I think we all need some coffee and a long talk about what happens next. They laughed, and hand in hand, they walked up to the house together. For the first time, Desmond wasn't sneaking in through the back door, wasn't parking a street away. He was walking through the front door with Samantha's hand in his, claiming her publicly, ready to face whatever came next. But would the world let them be happy? That was the question hanging over them as they sat down with Marshall to discuss the storm that was surely coming. The next few months tested them in ways they couldn't have imagined. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Amber's lawyers were efficient and merciless, but surprisingly, Amber herself seemed almost relieved. In private moments during mediation, away from her father's influence, she admitted the truth they both knew. Their marriage had been a prison for both of them. She was hurt, yes, wounded by the public nature of the betrayal, but not heartbroken. How could she be heartbroken over losing something she'd never really had? I hope you're happy, she said to Desmond during one of their final meetings, and for the first time she sounded sincere. I really do. Maybe we'll both get a second chance at doing this right. The business fallout was real. Richard Hastings made good on his threats. Several joint ventures dissolved, partnerships ended, investments were pulled. Desmond's father aged 10 years in those months, dealing with angry board members and nervous investors. But he never once told Desmond he'd made the wrong choice. Instead, he quietly worked to stabilize what could be saved and let go of what couldn't. "Some things are worth more than money," his father admitted one evening over drinks in his study. "It took watching my son fight for his happiness to remember that." The tabloids had a field day. "Billionaire's marriage crumbles over secret affair," screamed one headline. "White heir leaves wife for father's friend's daughter," declared another. For weeks, Desmond and Samantha couldn't step outside without cameras flashing, without reporters shouting questions. Some of the coverage was vicious. Samantha was painted as a home wrecker, a gold digger who'd seduced a married man. The racial dynamics weren't lost on anyone. Whispered comments about a black woman stealing a wealthy white man. Ugly stereotypes dredged up from people who should have known better. But Samantha held her head high, exactly as her father had taught her. When reporters cornered her outside her gallery, she looked directly into the cameras, said calmly, "I fell in love with a good man who was trapped in a loveless arrangement. We're not perfect, and our story isn't simple, but it's real, and it's ours, and I'm not apologizing for it." The clip went viral. Public opinion began to shift, especially as details emerged about Desmond and Amber's arranged marriage, about the business deal masquerading as a romance. People started asking questions. Wasn't it crueler to stay in a loveless marriage? Didn't everyone deserve a chance at real happiness? Marshall stood by them through all of it. His friendship with Desmond's father was strained, but not broken. Two old friends navigating complicated waters, trying to support their children while managing their own complicated feelings about the situation. "I won't lie and say this is easy," Marshall told Desmond over lunch one day. "Part of me wants to protect my daughter from all this ugliness. But I also see how you two are together. I see the way you look at her, the way she lights up around you. That's not something you find every day." 6 months after that explosive night in the penthouse, Desmond's divorce was finalized. He walked out of the courthouse with papers in hand, feeling lighter than he had in years. Samantha was waiting for him on the steps, and when he showed her the documents, she threw her arms around him with a squeal of joy that made passers-by smile despite themselves. "You're free," she whispered against his lips. "We're free," he corrected. They started building the life they dreamed about during those stolen moments. Desmond moved into a smaller apartment, nothing like the penthouse, but it was his choice, his space. Samantha hung art on the walls, filled the rooms with color and life and laughter. For the first time, Desmond came home to someone who was genuinely happy to see him, who asked about his day because she actually cared about the answer. He started making changes at work, too, using his position to push for more ethical business practices, to prioritize employee welfare over endless profit. His father was surprised but supportive, watching his son finally step into his own version of leadership rather than following someone else's template. Samantha's gallery work flourished. With Desmond's support, financial and emotional, she was able to expand her youth programs, giving more young artists the opportunities they deserved. She curated an exhibition featuring emerging black artists that got national attention, and Desmond stood beside her at the opening, beaming with pride as she gave interviews and networked with collectors. They went on real dates now. Dinner at restaurants, where they didn't have to hide in corners. Walks in Central Park, holding hands without looking over their shoulders. Movie nights curled up on the couch, arguing about whether the book or the film adaptation was better. All the simple, ordinary couple things that had once seemed impossible. But here's what surprised them most: the people who stood by them. Desmond's mother, who'd been quietly supportive from the beginning, became Samantha's champion. She invited Samantha to charity events, introduced her to society with the implicit message: this woman is family now, and you will treat her with respect. When gossip started at a gala about that situation, Desmond's mother shut it down with icy politeness that left no room for argument. Several of Desmond's friends from college reached out, admitting they'd always thought his marriage to Amber seemed hollow. "We're glad you're finally happy, man," one of them said over drinks. "Life's too short to spend it pretending." Even some of Amber's friends quietly expressed support. Women who understood the pressure of society expectations, of arranged partnerships, of sacrificing personal happiness for family duty. "Good for you both," one of them whispered to Samantha at an event. "I hope I have your courage someday." The support wasn't universal. Some doors closed. Some invitations stopped coming. Some people would always see their relationship as scandalous, their love as illicit. But Desmond and Samantha discovered something important. The people who really mattered, who truly cared about their happiness, stood by them. Everyone else was just noise. 9 months after the divorce was finalized, on a perfect spring afternoon, when the cherry blossoms were in full bloom, Desmond White and Samantha Green got married. They kept it intimate. 50 guests in a garden venue outside the city, nothing like the massive society wedding Desmond had endured with Amber. This time, every person in attendance was someone who genuinely loved them, who'd supported them through the hardest months of their lives. Marshall walked his daughter down the aisle, his eyes shining with tears of pride. He'd given Desmond his blessing weeks ago in a private conversation that had meant everything. "You fought for her," Marshall had said. "You proved you were serious. That's all a father can ask for." As Samantha appeared in her white dress, simple, elegant, perfect, Desmond felt his breath catch. She was radiant, glowing with happiness, and when her eyes found his, she smiled so big it made his chest ache. Marshall placed her hand in Desmond's with a firm squeeze. "Take care of my baby girl," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "With my life," Desmond promised. They'd written their own vows, because the traditional words didn't seem to capture what they'd been through together, what they meant to each other. Desmond went first, his voice strong, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Samantha, when I really met you that night at my father's estate, you woke something in me I didn't even know was sleeping. You showed me what it meant to be truly alive, truly myself. You had every reason to walk away when things got complicated, when loving me came with a cost, but you stayed. You believed in us even when I was afraid. You held your head high when people judged us. You loved me, not for what I could give you, but for who I was underneath all the pretense." His voice broke slightly. "I promise to love you passionately and faithfully. I promise to stand by you through every high and every low. I promise to be the man you see in me every single day. You are my heart, my partner, my home. You're everything I never knew I needed, and everything I'll never take for granted. I love you, Samantha Green, and I will love you for all my days." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Samantha's turn came, and she had to take a breath to steady herself before speaking. "Desmond, you are the bravest man I know. Not because you're fearless, we both know you're not, but because you faced your fears anyway. You risked everything for a chance at real happiness, real love. You chose truth over comfort and authenticity over approval." Her voice was thick with emotion. "You've shown me that real love isn't just about the perfect moments or the grand gestures. It's about showing up every day, even when it's hard. It's about choosing each other over and over again. You've been my partner, my safe place, my biggest supporter. And I promise to be all of those things for you too. I promise to cherish you and encourage you. I promise to laugh with you and comfort you. I promise to build a life with you that's honest and full and ours." Tears streamed down her face. "You showed me what true love means, and I will love you for all my days." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Desmond pulled Samantha into his arms and kissed her with everything he had, all the love, all the relief, all the overwhelming joy of finally being exactly where they were meant to be. The guests erupted in cheers and applause, and when they pulled apart, both of them were laughing and crying at the same time. At the reception, Marshall gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying in equal measure. "I've known Desmond since he was a boy," he said, raising his glass. "I've watched him grow up trying to fit into a mold that was never quite right for him. But when he met my daughter, I saw him finally become himself. It hasn't been an easy road, I won't pretend it has, but watching these two fight for each other, support each other, love each other through everything, that's what gives me hope. That's what reminds me that real love, honest love, is worth every struggle." He looked at the newlyweds with unabashed affection. "To Desmond and Samantha, may your love continue to be your greatest adventure." Desmond's father gave a toast too, shorter but no less meaningful. "My son taught me something these past months," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "He taught me that happiness matters more than appearances, that love matters more than business deals, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself." He raised his glass. "To Desmond and Samantha, thank you for reminding an old man what really matters." As the sun set and the party continued under twinkling lights, Desmond and Samantha had their first dance as husband and wife. They swayed together, lost in each other, barely aware of the crowd watching them. "Are you happy?" Desmond whispered against her hair. "I've never been happier," Samantha whispered back. "Are you?" "Happier than I ever thought possible," he said. "Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for being brave enough to fight for us," she replied. They held each other close, and in that moment, every struggle, every scandal, every difficult conversation felt worth it, because here they were, married, free, building the life they'd dreamed about during those stolen moments. Their story could have ended there, with the fairy tale wedding and the promise of happily ever after. But real life isn't a fairy tale, and Desmond and Samantha's journey taught them, and everyone watching, something more important than any storybook ending could. In the months and years that followed, they faced challenges. The business landscape shifted, and Desmond had to work harder to prove himself outside his family's shadow. Samantha's gallery faced funding cuts, and they had to get creative to keep programs running. They had disagreements and difficult days. Moments when the weight of what they'd been through pressed down on them. But they faced it all together. Desmond learned that real love isn't just about the passionate beginning or the dramatic rescue. It's about choosing each other on the boring Tuesday mornings and the frustrating Friday evenings. It's about saying, "I still choose you," when things are hard, when the initial excitement has settled into steady commitment. Samantha learned that being brave once isn't enough. You have to keep being brave, day after day, choosing authenticity over what's easy or expected. Together, they built a life that was messy and real and beautiful. They supported each other's dreams, challenged each other to grow, forgave each other's mistakes. They created the kind of partnership that neither had believed was possible when they were trapped in their old lives. Their story rippled outward in ways they never expected. Other people in loveless marriages found the courage to leave. Young people watching their journey learned that it's okay to choose happiness over duty, love over obligation. The conversations they sparked about arranged marriages, about societal expectations, about having the courage to live authentically, those conversations mattered. Amber eventually remarried. A man she actually loved this time, someone she chose for herself. When Desmond and Samantha ran into her at an event 2 years later, there were no hard feelings, just mutual respect between people who'd all finally found their way to happiness. Marshall and Desmond's father slowly repaired their friendship, bonding over their shared grandchildren when those eventually came along. Two old friends who'd navigated a complicated situation with as much grace as they could muster. And Desmond and Samantha, they never took their happiness for granted. Every morning when Desmond woke up next to his wife, he remembered what it felt like to be trapped in the penthouse, staring out at a life that wasn't really his. Every evening when Samantha came home to their apartment filled with art and laughter and love, she remembered what it felt like to be afraid that this man might not be brave enough to choose her. Their story proved something simple but profound. True love is worth fighting for. Sometimes following your heart means disappointing people, means facing scandal, means risking everything you thought mattered. But living authentically, loving honestly, choosing happiness over comfort, that transforms everything. So here's what I want you to think about. What would you risk for real happiness? Not the happiness that looks good on Instagram or impresses your parents or meets society's expectations, but the deep, bone-level happiness that comes from living authentically and loving freely. Desmond White had everything money could buy, but was dying inside. Samantha Green had purpose and passion, but was waiting for someone brave enough to really see her. Together, they risked everything: reputation, relationships, financial security, for a chance at real love. And they won. But this isn't just their story. It's a question for all of us. Are you living someone else's life? Are you trapped in golden cages of your own making, telling yourself it's enough because it looks good from the outside? Are you settling for comfort when you could have joy, for appearance when you could have authenticity? Because here's the truth Desmond and Samantha learned. The thing you're most afraid to reach for might be exactly what you need to be whole. The person who sees you, really sees you, is worth fighting for. And happiness blooms when you're finally brave enough to choose it. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to choose between what everyone expected and what your heart wanted? What did you choose? Or if you're facing that choice right now, what's holding you back? And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that real love is worth fighting for, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more true stories about courage, love, and the bravery it takes to live authentically, because we all deserve what Desmond and Samantha found. A love that's real, a life that's ours, and the courage to reach for both. What will you choose?